Welcome to another exciting edition of Near Mid Comic Radio, your local comic shop shrunk down, gamma radiated, sworn to protect the world that fears and hates it, and aired live every week, only on the Non-Productive Network, the only place that would have us. I'm your host, Frank, joined in studio, as always, by Pete and James. On Near Mint, we rank and review comics from best to worst. That's mint, near mint, good, fair, and poor to you newbies, and try to guide you in what to read and what might be better to avoid. We are, of course, continuing our read-through of Hickman's run on House of X and Powers of 10. This is it! The last issue of House of X. This has been a wild ride. I have very much enjoyed House of X so far. What about you two? What do you feel about this, of the two twin series we've been reading together?
I have very mixed feelings about where this is setting us up to go in X-Men.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You're pre-gaming, you're seeing where this is going next?
Yeah, I mean, this is the platform from which Hickman is launching his new vision of the X-Men that will, within weeks, be turned over to multiple other creators to play in this sandbox. And I know he was setting up, he wanted the X-Men to feel special again, but they're coming off really weird.
Oh, he definitely reintroduced weird. James, you haven't been reading X-Men in a while, so what do you think of House of X in general? Just kind of a pre-review review.
I think I really, in general, have enjoyed it. I think as you guys said, this sets up a bunch of creators to play with the X-Men in a new kind of sandbox, and I'm interested for stories in that sandbox.
Mm-hmm. I think what House of X, of the two books, House of X and Powers of 10, I think House of X was a little easier to get your fingers around or mind around. Yeah. It's a little bit more straightforward of a story, even though it is a trip. So we're going to talk about the last issue, and then, of course, we're going to spoil everything that came before as well. In this book, it's really just a recap of where we're leaving the X-Men, probably in I guess, full continuity in the Marvel Universe. This almost is a wrap of what most people would think of the natural narrative of the story is. If you thought that Hoxpox was just going to reintroduce X-Men into Marvel in a way that's like, this is the latest version of the characters, then I think it's fair enough to say that this is it. This is where we're leaving the X-Men. We were just basically going to recap from a few months before the Krakoa experiment was officially launched, with Xavier announcing to all humanity, including superheroes, that, listen, this is what's going to happen here. Mutants are going to move on to their own country, and you're going to let us, because we're going to give you this, not gifts, but we're going to pay for it. And that's it. We are the inheritors of the Earth. Deal with it. And then we see a little bit about the council of the Quiet Council.
The Quiet Council, yeah.
And a little bit of how things are working out for the X-Men now that they have achieved their long-standing goal of, I guess, at least internal harmony. And that's it. We are left off. This could be the last X-Men book ever. Think about it. This has a conclusion. You say, why
I only say that because I think there's so many questions left unanswered, and so many questions about how things will play out in the future.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm not saying that there's nowhere else the narrative can go, but I do think it creates a certain bookend where you're like, these people are hunted through society. They never found a home. They are not welcome in any human earthly society, and this is their answer. Yeah. They have formed their own culture. Like, if 1,000 years in the future of the X-Men, they're effectively Inhumans, which I'd like to get to in a bit, then I kind of say, all right, this is an interesting origin of how that got to be.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard to, like, separate this from Powers of 10, but, like, I agree. I think House of X feels like this complete narrative. Like, there's an idea that Xavier and Magneto and Moira, they want to establish this nation, this independence for the X-Men that is a molding of all of their values. And we get that. We get that story from beginning to end. And that's what this does. And I like that they do address some things, even some things we brought up here that we were concerned about. They do address them in this book. They don't leave, like, all the big plot threads hanging.
What? Give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, the big one is Sabretooth, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we made a big deal out of Sabretooth kind of just being Sabretooth and then all the bad mutants being allowed to just kind of walk onto this island and now you're good guys. So making an example of Sabretooth, you know, as distasteful as it might be.
I want to deal with that in a minute.
Okay.
But let's do this chronologically, because obviously we're just doing our big overarching feelings for the story, but let's do the big first reveal. It's Professor X's speech to humanity.
Yeah.
What do we think
It's
about
a
that?
psychic loudspeaker.
Right. Yeah. First of all, pretty evasive. You're in the minds of, I guess, everyone, every human.
Apparently.
Apparently, what's going on?
I don't know why he would not also broadcast it to the mutants. I mean,
Right.
they should know too.
But what do we think about that action, that powerful scene?
I loved the scene, and it totally continues this trend of like Xavier, you know, not the villain, but boy,
It's
the
gray.
dark gray.
It's
Yeah.
gray into dark. Go on. Sorry.
I take issue with, wait. Okay, this is happening, but who has given Xavier the authority to speak for all of mutant kind?
Right. All right. So I had some issues, and I'm not sure where it comes in. At one point, put a flag on this because I do want to get back to it. I'm a little concerned by how much literally every mutant is on board. Every mutant's on board. The only resistant mutant we see is Creed, is Sabretooth. Mm-hmm. And that's probably mostly to do with the fact that he's being arrested and being punished. Mystique is surly, but she's there and a leader. So there are people who are a little resistant, but no one who's like, we have yet to see any mutant who has decided, no, I'm an American. I am I am European. I'm this first. I don't want to go to an island and give up my citizenship and become someone else.
And
even
so far
Dazzler's in the end, and you think Dazzler, just I don't know why she was the one that popped into my head. She might be a person who's like, no, I'm okay with being a mutant and being,
I've been fairly successful.
But no nail sticking out saying I don't want to play along.
And beyond that, I think we've seen the majority of the likely nails that would stick out explicitly not sticking out,
Right.
and joining in,
Or being not coerced, but I think of like Emma Frost, for example, right?
Find something that they like.
Exactly. They seem to, originally they'd be like, what
Yeah.
do you want with my time? I don't want to deal with you. And then it's like either the narrative finds the thing that she's interested in, or Xavier and Eric and Moira, ideally set it up so that, she's interested. But even then, yeah, exactly.
I don't want. I think we got ahead of where I wanted to be, but let's keep following this up because we're already on it. There. To Hickman's credit, to the credit of the story being told, I think we get a couple of nods of people, like James just said, of people who you would think may be resistant, being convinced, right?
Yeah.
Come on board for the following reasons. For example, Magneto, he gets a come on board arc throughout the entire book. Emma gets a story a couple issues back. Even the fact that Mystique is there surly, that suggests that, she's getting something out of it. She's not suddenly like a gleaming, positive, happy person. She's there with her personality intact. To Exodus is another good example in this book of you get some characterization, you see why from their viewpoint they like it.
Exodus to me makes a lot of sense for joining up.
Right. And I think many of them make a lot of sense. And at very least, there's work being done in the writing and the storytelling to say, we are aware of it and we're putting some effort into why it were the case. And I would
maybe we'll get to some of the other problematic ones like M-Plate later on.
Right.
But
and there's some people, or even to some degree, Gorgon, right, who's a leader in this thing. I'm willing to give them like the fact that they did a head nod in saying that some of these characters had issues and there was something that brought them on board. You have to assume that the other ones who you're also questioning, why would you be there? Also had something dangled in front of them. And maybe even with the way Xavier's been acting, maybe even been coerced.
I think there's a lot of mental coercion going on here, especially with the good guys.
Yeah.
Because the good guys seem to be acting more off their usual character than the villains.
Yeah, some of these good heroes are okay with having like horrible, horrible mutants near them who have kidnapped them in the past, have experimented on them, have killed loved ones.
I mean, I'll give that a pass. I'll overlook that because villains frequently reform, even temporarily, in X-Men books, and people seem to be okay with that. Like Sabretooth has been an X-Man on multiple occasions.
Sure, I just feel like I would need a little bit to see why, and I am given a little bit. Every once in a while, there's a person who kind of tips their head and says, "Okay, we have to work together. It's for the greater good for our people," and I get that. There are, however, I mean, this is a long way to go for a point, but despite the fact that there are nods, there are head nods of saying yes. Everybody who's maybe questionable for why they're here, there is an answer, but we just don't have the real estate to talk about everyone just yet. There are a few people who I'm like, this almost bothers me, and not in a way that I didn't enjoy the book, but like I can't wait for the explanation or the shoe to drop.
It's like I'm demanding an explanation for a lot of these.
Yeah, and I'll just mention one.
I was going to say, who is this?
For me, and maybe we'll talk about it later in this podcast, Apocalypse. I know he gets a lot of real estate in these last two books about why he would want to be involved, but I'll just put this out there. And he mentions it in the council. He says, well, if we're not being tested, I'm okaying a rule that says I can't kill humans. I'm not saying Apocalypse's goal is to kill humans, but he wants that war to make mutants better, right? So, and there's a little bit of an allusion at this at the end of the book where he's sitting there looming and sort of staring at everybody else as they're celebrating. But he's one of those characters I'm like, I totally get what he was doing in Powers of X and why he may have changed his mind. Here, it seems like he's passively just saying, well, I don't really care about this rule, so sure, make it against the rules to kill humans. Doesn't feel like Apocalypse.
I actually don't have a problem with Apocalypse.
Yeah, I know people. I had a feeling you were going to say that because you've mentioned it in the other
it all
episodes.
Tracks with him for me, especially the way they're characterizing him in this, where he's not blindly saying, oh yeah, this is great, you guys keep up the good job. There's very much, to me, the way I'm reading this is you guys are doing the whole mutant supremacy thing. Not the way I would have done it, not the way I prefer, but you're getting there, and I'm not going to stand in your way.
That's a great throwback. Let's go back to the beginning of Xavier's speech, right? Because we went right off of that to something else. Xavier's speech, pretty powerful. Love the fact that he addresses some things, specifically how mutants, their children are being killed, and people just sort of accepted it. It's okay. It just happens, including the Avengers who get a little. And then Fantastic Four, they get like panels, they get page space.
That whole "you did nothing to stop it"
right.
was very much aimed at them.
Love that aspect. The fact that he's broadcasting to everyone's mind, very shady. And finally, ending on the "we are the inheritors of the earth, deal with it." I feel like that is problematic at best. And I think it's going to come back and bite, obviously. I mean, that's probably, we see, and in part of the flashes in that speech, it's the people who are making Nimrod, who are listening into this broadcast, and you know why they're motivated to do that. They were told they were going to be outpaced, they were going to be left behind.
Yeah. I particularly like, they've repeated the phrase over and over in the books, the world changed while you slept.
Yeah.
And I like the way they connect that to the dreams. Xavier's dream for mutant kind was something that was one of the themes of the X-Men since the beginning. It was, that parallel with Martin Luther King. I have a dream where mutants can live in peace with humanity.
Yeah.
And that fact that Xavier talks about how his dream was a lie.
Yeah.
And then connects it back to humans went to sleep, and in their dreams they were the masters of the earth. And that dream was a lie.
It's really super powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And very ominous.
Very ominous.
It's like, that was not a good guy speech. I'm sorry.
It didn't feel like it, right?
It's not entirely a bad guy speech.
No,
he's not saying like, and we'll be over there next week to conquer you all. Like he's not twirling his mustache, but it is problematic. It puts the X-Men in this clear position of power over humanity in a way that humanity has very little say in. you
Yeah.
know? And we know that from things that happen in other books too, right? So they can choose not to recognize the mutant nation all they want. Xavier and the team are still going to take mutants out of that country and give
Right.
them sovereignty.
Right.
It's
And
very frequently in the past, the parallels have been drawn between mutant kind and minorities. Mutant kind is an oppressed minority. Narrative stand in for that.
right.
If you look at this and flip the script, mutant kind now is almost like European settlers, and humanity is the Native Americans.
There is at very least God, it's very weird. At very least, there's a gentrification aspect to this. Like, there's this, you're going to be pushed out, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to make things better for you, but eventually that means you're not going to be here anymore. And it's odd because they're not, like, Xavier ends this speech on a, we are the inheritors of the earth, but the speech was about, we just want our country, one little country.
Yeah.
So it leaves a big open question, and a lot of what they're doing politically in this leaves big open questions of how do we get from one point to the other? Because you going off on your own island country and being away from everyone and giving us, or selling us whatever, all these powerful riches in terms of drugs sounds fine. But what was that last bit about inheriting the entirety of the earth? Because what is the timeline on that? I kind of need to know. And also, when they start making rules, one of them is multiply. But what is the timeline on this? What you're giving us boons, but also saying it's because we're going to take over, in a way. And there is a colonial aspect to this.
You're going to be really comfortable for now.
right?
But I think they're talking, certainly, yes, a colonial aspect to it, but they're talking about genetics. They're just saying that, specifically, jumping ahead a little bit, one of the rules is make more mutants, right?
Yeah.
So not only is that them procreating, but we already know that mutations are just an
That
inevitable
spring from
aspect
humans.
of humanity living.
Right.
There's absolutely no scenario, at least in Xavier's mind at this point, where humanity isn't
It doesn't eventually just drop away.
because
But in the math on that is eventually, with time, humans will eventually all become mutants. Then at what point does Krakoa become Earth, and then there's a small island of humans left? It really, there's a lot of questions, and if we readers are having these questions, imagine what the rest of humanity is thinking right now with this happening. So it's problematic. Let's move on to the next big complicated thing, is the Quiet Council. We get to see who the rulers of Krakoa are.
boy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Outside
boy.
the comic book, there's actually a fun story with this. I don't know if they always intended to reveal. I'm assuming they must have, because it's such a big part of the story. Reveal the Quiet Council in this week's book.
Oh,
But when that original redacted Quiet Council was released in the last one, apparently Marvel sent out digital review copies to select readers, and everything was redacted just like that. But some smart people realized that in the digital copy,
They could just
you could
remove
highlight
the redax, yeah.
and there's
copy
text-
and paste
Oh.
the actual text
That's
was
really
underneath
neat.
the redaction bar.
I hope that was. You know what? I'm going to give it to them. I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
I don't care if it was or wasn't. It's fun.
But it did reveal it still revealed who's still redacted under the Red King,
Oh yeah. All right.
which since it hasn't actually been published yet, I'm not going to spoil here.
yeah, it's
We do
something
spoilers for everything in the past, but not.
it's pretty
not the
obvious.
future.
It's been on the internet for a while, and that's why it's
Yeah,
obvious.
You can find it if you
Right.
want.
So we've got the the Autumn Council. I'm going to butcher which one is which, but we've got Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse. I guess the three
Yeah, right.
factions of leadership. We've got the unknown Red King, White Queen, which is Emma Frost, and Sebastian Shaw as the Black King.
Yeah, Black King.
And then we've got I don't even know what they're called. Are they the Spring Council? Who's
That Spring Council is what you just did, the Hellfire Club,
yeah,
essentially.
all right.
There's the Winter Council, which is Mr. Sinister, Exodus, and Mystique.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's mostly like former villains, and by former, we don't know why we're using that term.
Yeah.
And then Summer was Storm, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler.
Right, which
You
are
know, the
X-Men.
good guys.
Yeah, the X-Men mainstays, I would call them. And of course, we got Krakoa and Cypher as
who just hang out.
just hang out there. And we got our captains as well. Cyclops is a captain, I think.
The
and
great
Magic.
captains.
Yes. Oh, yes. And Magic is in there, and I think the Gorgon is in there.
Gorgon and Bishop.
Okay, they didn't have a lot of real estate on these pages, but the council gets together and they decide to start forming rules. First rule is pretty interesting.
Don't talk about the Silent Council.
Of course.
No.
It's we can't kill humans because killing mutants is kind of like, what does it even matter anymore now that we are immortal?
Yeah.
Now we have the resurrection machine.
It's like, that was actually a very interesting thing. It's like, does it matter if you murder someone who can't be killed?
Yeah. So they segue pretty well into the don't kill humans, which is where Apocalypse is like, meh, I don't even care anymore. It's where my hackles went up a little bit. But I think it's an interesting point and a solid one. The next rule is a very confusing, I think, honor a Krakoa. Just be respectful to Krakoa, which sounds cool, but there was like, as a legal professional, I'm like, what does that mean?
I actually really liked that argument that they had
because
it started off with Sebastian Shaw talking about land rights,
right? Which is a perfect character to bring it up. Yeah,
absolutely. And then Cypher piping up for Krakoa saying, "Hey, the land that you're talking about is actually a living sentient being.
Yeah.
So before you start divvying him up, I think we really need to examine the ethics here."
Yeah, and I think that's really cool and has a lot that can later be expanded upon. But this time they were all just sort of like, we agree that this is probably a thing that would be interesting to build up later. And there was
since we're codifying the three basic principles of the world, let's just say respect the land.
Yeah, sounds good.
When we'll put a pin in it.
I like how, I guess, I don't know if like's the right word, but the rules feel very Old Testament, for lack of a better word.
That's true.
You know, it's no murdering of man, you know, respect the land, and then make more mutants.
It's a little bit Island of Dr. Moreau, honestly. But yeah.
It's like that freaking Nightcrawler thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if I would have felt differently if he didn't have such like a devilish look on his face,
right?
When he said make more mutants.
He just kind of looked like a devil, but I mean, he's quoting scripture, he's quoting theology, he's the mission of humanity in all forms is to procreate.
As we've already discussed, that could very easily become a colonial mission.
Oh, yeah.
If you understand, or if you know Nightcrawler's character, it's very much in his character to be quoting the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
However, it's very much against his character to use it in this way.
It's I don't know. It's interesting how this will develop. The first actual exercise of law that they've established was dealing with one, possibly the only one. Certainly, they think it will. They hope it will be one of the few criminals in the mutant world, and that would be Sabretooth. That's Creed. So yeah, we were wondering about that because we think one of the legitimate gripes that the rest of the world has is that you are exonerating and giving amnesty to all these horrible criminals that have legitimately murdered people, and that they, current countries have problems with International Criminal Court because they sort of just pish-posh it away and say that your laws don't apply to me.
It's like some of these mutants have attempted and others have carried out genocide.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
Multiple times.
I think that's the problem here, though. Well, obviously, I liked the resolution of Sabretooth getting punished here for his crimes. Like, I guess, at what point did the bar start and stop on those crimes, right? Maybe I'm trying to follow the timeline. So we are sitting next to Magneto and Apocalypse here.
The excuse here is that Magneto says, when you were on the mission for Krakoa, so by then the clock has already been ticking, you disobeyed my orders and killed people.
Okay, all right.
So I guess. But it doesn't mean that question is a completely valid question other people would have.
Yeah, you disobeyed orders, but not laws at that point.
Right. And
They were laws only established after.
I want to put that aside, although these are great points. So right now, we don't have prisons on Krakoa.
Oh.
All we have
Prisons are
is eternal
forbidden.
torment where you are conscious of it. For what? All crimes? All crimes? Everything you do wrong on Krakoa means you get sucked into the planet's core forever.
Which we are not counting as a prison.
Right.
Prisons are for babies. You steal candy, you're going to the down underland
It was,
Yeah.
and
to suffer for all eternity in
I
blackness.
think we're made to be like, this makes sense because, he's such a horrible
He's a
person
horrible
who murders so
murderer,
many people.
but apocalypse.
It makes sense when it's Sabretooth that you send down there, who is this vicious animalistic killer who generally is acknowledged that he kills for fun.
Right.
It's like even Apocalypse had a purpose for what he was doing.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not saying it's good or excuses what he's done.
When
or
does
justifies
Wolverine
it.
get pushed down in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
he's
also,
better at what he does than
why,
Sabretooth.
Why would Sabretooth, and to be honest, why is this worse than killing him? Because, or why is this better than killing him? Because the resurrection machine, you have no choice but to activate the resurrection machine. That was a little confusing to me and
Also-
a little sloppy.
Also, how many people did the special insertion team murder to stop the...
But they were all okay with that because they were on a mission.
they were
It was on a
active-
mission. It was an act of war.
Yeah, they do address
They
that
do
pretty
address
well.
it, yeah.
They do.
They say hey, when it's defending your country, there's always. So
We'll have to deal with that in the future.
For me, the question isn't so
War crimes
much
are determined by
about
the
when
winners.
does the clock start, although that's a good question for the rest of humanity, and it's not so much of the what's capital punishment, what isn't. For me, really, it's the how can this be the only punishment you have is suck people into the island
Well, they
forever.
just didn't have to make. They just didn't have to make smaller rules yet because nobody stole any candy.
Right, and I guess the assumption here is that if you do minor infractions, you're treated. I mean, prisons aren't necessarily a good thing. Maybe it's better to have social workers dealing with you, or Professor X zoinking your brain, which I think will come along sooner rather than
I'm
later.
sure at some point.
But it's extremely odd and very uncomfortable to
I'll
see.
say
that.
this: if you're drawing a real world parallel again, this would be essentially they're laying out their constitution, their U.S. Constitution for Krakoa, and the Constitution doesn't deal with the smaller crimes.
It's a little more detailed though than 3 bullet points.
Well, you're right, but I'm just and this is a comic book.
Yeah,
All right.
We're not actually basing a legal system on this.
I know, but I'm going to say that they went to a lot of great detail in some of the other between the pages material.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Would
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
a 1-page draft of a constitution have been too much to ask?
No. You
And
couldn't
don't
fit
go-
that in because we needed to explain all the differences in the 27 different tiers of cyber organic world minds in the universe.
That's Powers of 10. But yes, in this book, it's I get it. You are deliberately telling me that we don't have prisons here. Instead, we have eternal jail. I mean, I get it. I'm not saying that there aren't new other laws coming along, but as of now, you are being weird. At
Yes.
very least, you're being weird about this because that is just a very weird way to handle it. Hey, man, I don't want to imprison you. I just want to lock you up forever.
I'm going to put this on record.
Keep your mind awake.
If Xavier's sending me to eternal jail, kill me first.
Yeah.
Because that sounds way worse.
That's on the
when
record.
Xavier sentences Creed, I will give them the one bit of credit on this. They avoided the temptation to say that he put an E in the front of the word exile. It's you are exiled.
Oh, God.
And it wasn't just exiled.
We're done. We're done with podcasts and podcasting in general.
Hey, I complimented that.
Yes.
It's a good thing that
Yeah,
he
they
didn't
didn't do
that.
it. Yeah. All right. So that is, I guess, the two big tentpoles of this book. The final tentpole, I think, is the celebratory scene that came immediately after, which
Yay.
is where I feel like this is the wrap up of X-Men.
This is Mutant Yubnub.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is really, it really could be the wrap of X-Men. I mean, you've got a lot of longtime enemies and frenemies sharing a beer. That was pretty cool. There's a scene where Jean Grey offers Emma Frost a beer while I think is it Wolverine who offers
It looks
Cyclops
like Gorgon.
a beer at some point. Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey share a beer, and then Emma Frost and Jean Grey share a beer. Like everybody is literally sharing the same 6-pack. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they had to run out of beer there at some point.
Mutant 6-pack.
It's mutant 6-pack regenerates. It is.
The Eric and the Eric and Charles with the fireworks behind them, a particular piece of art I enjoy.
Exodus is entertaining children, I believe, in the background. And One Shot Dazzler's out there having a good time, and
there's actually a shot of Havoc giving Cyclops a hug,
right?
Which is after the recent events kind of messed up. They were in a rough spot.
It is legitimately joyous to see them so happy that they did something good, except for the fact there was a lot of bad in what they just did. There is the broadcasting to all humanity. There's the veiled threat to all humanity. There's the locking up one of the mutants forever in forever jail. And then finally, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but just speaking out loud, there's Apocalypse staring at everyone, and I'm almost like, come on, Apocalypse, save us from this. I don't know if I actually believe that, but I do think it is like way conflicted.
I just want to throw this out there. Historically speaking, and right. Pete, you're a history person. I mean, I can't really think of a nation that isn't really founded on some horrors. Nations and worlds are built on the backs of other people. And
Luxembourg. Yeah. They never did anything to nobody.
Oh, what?
All right.
Luxembourg? Didn't they just split off from...
We're not getting into this. That's a different podcast.
No horror. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I'm saying in the general scheme of things, when you think about the big nations, when you think about how our world
that way.
Is founded, it seems like there's nothing that's not built on the backs of these horrible atrocities. And is this just the X-Men's go at it? If that's it, then, it maybe didn't turn out so badly.
I think it's time to quickly go around and talk about all the things that we maybe want answers for, because this is the end of House of X. So a couple of things that just bullet points, really quick. I want to know more about why Apocalypse is on board at this point. I got it in Powers of X. I'm not quite convinced in this. I feel like there was one other thing, and I forgot what it was. So, James, you go while I try to remember. Anything you got?
I don't have a ton in House of X that I need answered. House of X itself, as a thing, I don't think posed that many questions, right? It was focused on telling this main story. I think some of the the things that are it intentionally left open. I'd love to know who the Red King is. I'd love maybe a little more explanation of how the politics of this world is going to work, considering we only spent like 6 pages on it in one issue. But knowing that this is a platform to tell future stories, I think helps curtail that need. Does that make sense? It feels whole. Despite the fact that it obviously left out, things that it just didn't have time to tell.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from on that. I think that's one of the big differences between a new reader and an old reader in this. Because for an old reader, there's a lot of questions in this about why are these characters acting so differently from the way they should be.
Right, and I haven't read these characters in a long time, so I'm kind of accepting these characters very directly as their new personalities.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either.
Yeah, and to be clear, like even and Pete's he's owning into this. It's not necessarily should be. It's how you might have thought they would be. Because I from out there in the world, people are very divisive about whether or not these are. And I think reading some of these characters, you're like, this is pretty accurate. And then there are sometimes you're like, I don't know about this one. Part of it is because there's been so many writers over history that have written these characters. It depends on your flavor of the one you want.
Yes and no. I mean, there's for most characters, there's been certain general ways that they're characterized that this just completely went against. Storm is my go-to. Yeah. The way she was acting in that, I call it a cult scene.
Yeah.
Where she's doing I call it the Wicker Man scene, actually.
Yeah, It's hard because I think some of these characters we don't get a ton of extra time with,
You're right.
So like if, we don't get that background, something like that could be as simple as, Xavier going to Storm and saying like, "Hey, here's the ritual for when the people come back," and Storm going, "Huh?" And him going, no, come on, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
It's
like, just please do this for me.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like, if she's got her reservations and is just doing that because...
I think Xavier's the one I'll come back to, right?
Yeah.
If there's a character, but I think it's intentional here, obviously.
Right,
if there's a character that you come back to and being like, huh, right? And you're meant to question, like, is this really him? Is this just the effect of knowing what all of his failures are going to be? Or is it something more? It would be Xavier. It's Xavier for me. That would be it.
You know what? I'd have to say I would feel better about that if I had a little bit of a, more or less subtle nod to a, hey, there's something different about Xavier.
Speaking of something different, we keep saying this wrong in past podcasts, but for no reason, I'll just bring this factoid up. Xavier kills his twin sister with psychic abilities as Cassandra tries to choke him in utero. I think it the other way around. We say that Xavier choked her, but that I brought that up for no reason. There's literally has no effect on the way Xavier may or may not be presented. Probably, maybe we don't know actually.
I like that though that it's subtle, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a defined answer.
I'm not saying this is a flaw. I'm saying these are questions you want answered afterwards.
I don't even necessarily want an answer.
Yeah.
I just want a little bit less subtle acknowledgement of the fact that the problem exists and that it's not just that the creators are ignoring how he has.
You would have liked somebody to
I
turn around and do a side eye.
Yeah, if somebody says, "Hey, how come Xavier?"
I have one that's related to this. My question I want answered. I want to see somebody who isn't on board, some mutant who is not on board with this, because that's what I'm having difficulty. I get that they have experienced many horrible things that have happened to all mutants, but some mutant somewhere out there has been sheltered and doesn't want to go live on an island full of mutants away from the only life they ever knew. Mm-hmm. Right? There's got to be some Morlocks, Colossus, somebody who's
Colossus is on board. We've seen him.
Somebody who's really who's maybe a tool of the state. Right, that they were raised in and has not.
No, Mega Red made it in,
or maybe even just a person who's like, no, not my bag. Sorry, thanks. And I want to see what their position in all this is. We kind of get Submariner, and that's kind of cool. It's not exactly the same as having just Shmo mutant who has a choice in the matter. Like, this guy's the king of Atlantis.
It's that weird status as he's not always accepted as a mutant. He's like a bunch of other things too.
Yeah, but interesting. I just would like to see some run-of-the-mill mutant who has an issue with this.
I think you've got a very good point on that.
I want to see, is there a Palestinian mutant who doesn't want to leave Palestine for Krakoa?
That's cool.
Right? Like, I mean, there are plenty of people who've faced oppression in the world and they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
That's their thing. Not that they like the oppression, but that's part of it.
My ancestors
they belong here. So none of this happens. Not a single mutant is having issue with this. That's what I want to see.
I think my big unanswered question may actually be the answer to yours.
Oh,
because I had all those things that we were just talking about too as unanswered questions. But while we were going back through this, I noticed something that now is really eating at me. What about Moira?
Yeah, where's Moira?
Where's Moira after she made it back from Life 10?
Right. They mentioned
whatever.
Moira at some point, like
at the
Moira
very beginning.
room.
They're in the Moira room, and I think she's there, but that's a month ago.
Right.
That's
before. That's before the mission.
Yeah. And she's supposed to be like in some part where the island where they can't see. I don't know if I missed that or if it's a big question, but we'll find out.
It's Moira's no space.
Yeah,
there's a no space. Yeah.
All right, we've spent a lot of time on House of X, number 6, and the entire series. I think we should review this issue and the book as a whole, because I know that these are a twin series, but I'm curious. Who wants to go first in the review?
I'll go first because
All
I'm the new novice and my opinions can be dashed off so easily. I really liked House of X. House of X as a whole was really good. And we're just talking about House of X. So House of X was really good. I think it has a really strong narrative. I think I like the characters. I'm interested despite some of the issues with maybe how they're being told. And I like the problems it represents, you know, even if they're problems that I feel like they've got to be intentional, right? There's a reason why we're like, you know, these laws are weird. Xavier's weird. There's something more here, and it feels narratively whole. I think this book puts a really nice bow on it. So I'm going to give this book a near mint for this specific issue. And I'm going to give House of X a mint. I really like House of X.
Someone's so afraid of the review. It's so great. All right. For House of X issue 6 and the entire series, it's the same review. I'm going to give it the same ranking. I loved it. Honestly, I thought maybe I was going to be waiting for this wrap up to happen and be disappointed that it didn't tie everything up in a bow. And I now realize, in my opinion, we have one more issue in both these series to know. In my opinion, this is setting up the new X-Men. X-Men have always had an issue with dying and resurrecting, and Hickman made it part of their core. A reason why this happens. I love that the X-Men feel weird. I think it's a little, like, part of me almost feels like they're getting a little bit more like Inhumans in a way, but not quite. I don't know. It's very confusing. I'm very conflicted, but I love what I've gotten so far. So I'm giving House of X a mint. Overall and for this issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop
me if this sounds familiar.
All right.
Is this book perfect? No. What is?
Okay.
But it's a start. And a good one. Maybe. It's like, I don't know if this is a good start yet. But that was a quote from Xavier in the book, for those of you who
talking about House
didn't
of X.
notice it. Yeah.
Very meta.
But yeah, I'm gonna give the number 6 a near mint because, like I said, I really wish I had that little bit of confirmation that yes, we know there's something wrong. You're right to feel that there's something off about Xavier,
right,
and the whole situation. But with that minor point aside, I'll go mint for the whole series.
Wow!
We did it!
Triple mint! I did not think that was going to happen. I really didn't think so. All right. That's great.
One thing before we wrap up, I feel like the legacy of this book, this is a challenge to all the creators who are going to pick up this platform after. House of X can be great, but if the stories that are told after this don't utilize the really interesting scenarios that this sets up and refuses to touch on any of these really big problems or these big real world things that this wants to deal with, the legacy of this will fall by the wayside so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, I still have high hopes for it, but I've read a lot of the previews for the upcoming books. Was it Rise of X is what they're calling the new launch platform, the series of books.
Right.
And I'm not convinced that these are going to pick up with what was good about House of X.
I think a slow burn is acceptable to a certain extent, but we'll have to see. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Near Mint, please like, follow, and subscribe so you can get the latest in the podcatcher of your choice. Oh, and leave us a good review so more people find out about the show. One more issue left. Powers of 10, number 6 comes out next week. Our last issue in this review arc. Will everything get wrapped up? Probably not in the way we originally thought, but in a way that might be very, very interesting. I have a theory I'm going to leave us off on. The librarian is Apocalypse. And he builds Nimrod because he's like, someone's got to challenge mutants.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.